Previously on Popping Collars.
Allow me to offer my opinion on that question, Greg, before we move on.
Nice.
I would say, and then I'd like to hear yours, Greg. If you don't say a thing that I think you're going to say, I'm going to out you and say it, and say you said it. So you might not know what that is. I'm going to say it in your voice. That's right. This is Greg Knight.
All right. Welcome to Popping Collars, the podcast that lives at the intersection of religion and pop culture. I am Liz Easton. I'm the canon to the ordinary for the Diocese of Nebraska. And I'm here with my co-host today, Greg Knight in Palm Beach, Florida. Greg, what are you up to these days?
Oh, I am dodging the cicadas and the mosquitoes and all the other critters down here in South Florida.
I'm recording with the window open right now, and the cicadas are so loud, I'm afraid they'll interfere with our broadcast. My other co-host here today is Ricardo Avila from Long Beach, California. Ricardo, what are you up to? What's going on?
Hi there, Liz. Yes, as you said, I am in lovely Long Beach, California. I am the interim rector of St. Luke's Episcopal Church. I have just returned from a week at the Dickens Universe, and I bet our listeners want to know just what that is.
I bet they do.
Another plug for the 19th century. The Dickens Universe happens every year, the first week of August, on the UC Santa Cruz campus, where 200 professors, grad students, high school teachers, elder hostel people, and the public who is interested come together and discuss a Dickens novel for an entire week and have tea and drinks and food in the cafeteria and parties. And it's actually a lot of fun. You would not believe that from the description I'm giving, but it is awesome.
Does it help that you're married to somebody from the 19th century?
Yes, my time-traveling husband, William, he is definitely the one who got me hooked.
Joining us today as a special guest for his second time on Popping Collars is Andy Shamel. Andy is on a farewell tour of the United States before heading to Oxford in a few weeks. Andy, tell us what you're up to. What's going on?
Well, until about a month ago, I was the Episcopal campus minister at Stanford and am no longer. And so, yes, as Liz said, I am visiting family and friends before I move to England for some time, particularly looking at the relationship between religious experience and the imagination.
Well, this is the 68th episode of Popping Collars, if you can believe that. And our subject today is smartphones, the little computers that we all carry around in our pockets and our purses that connect us to the larger world and sort of organize our lives and sometimes rule our lives in ways that we appreciate and that we don't appreciate. Does everyone here today have a smartphone?
Right here.
Yes.
Right in my hand.
We've talked about social media before on Popping Collars. We've talked about Twitter and its influence on snark and on the church. We have a social media presence of our own. And of course, smartphones aren't all about social media, but for many of us, it's sort of our main tool for that connection. We're interested in talking today about the ways that our smartphones influence our spiritual lives for better or for worse. And I thought we'd start with just a little check-in question, youth group style. What is the app that we love to hate? The one that we kind of hate, but we use all the time anyway. Andy, do you want to get us started?
Probably Facebook Messenger. Not because the app is bad. I hate Facebook. I have to use it. I realize that I'm locked in. These apps, they don't just meet a problem, they try to change the way that we behave.
I hate to love this app, but it's a game called Toy Blast. Ooh. And it's so for children. It's basically Candy Crush, but I think better because there are explosions and it's not as hard. And the reason I love Toy Blast is it really triggers something in my brain. There's just some sort of adrenal something or other. There's this little girl with big eyes, and you're helping her reach some goal that will never be reached. But she gets happy when you're winning, and on the last 3 moves when you know you're going to die, she gets all sad. And her face falls, and she looks like she's about to cry. And I swear, I've gotten to that point, and I'm like, oh, shut up. Just start talking to her.
I mean, I guess I'm kind of with Ricardo. Like, it's the addictive things that I like to do the most. So it's like, yeah, so it's the games that are just constantly going, that have no ultimate goal except to just kind of experience them. But there's something about just checking in with a mobile game where you just kind of feel locked in. It's like, and eventually the thing about mobile games that I hate is that they start to feel like jobs. I mean, I had to delete Words with Friends because it just felt like a job every time. It was like, well, I've got to play because I don't want to upset my friends. And it just wasn't any fun anymore.
As you guys are talking, I agree that I think Messenger is ridiculous. And what I don't like about it is it feels like a violation. Like, I have thousands of Facebook friends. Only a small fraction of them have my cell phone number. I don't necessarily want everyone basically texting me, which is what Messenger is. So that's sort of, I don't like that. It feels weird. I don't know if Popping Collars listeners know this about me, but I'm a fairly frugal person. And I crave a kind of materially simple life. I don't often achieve it, but that's sort of where my heart is. And iPhones, my laptop makes me feel the same way. But what I don't like about my iPhone is that it's this very expensive and sophisticated machine that I use for very unsophisticated things. Like, I don't need that type of technology, at my fingertips all the time. That's true. Like, sometimes I'll look at my laptop, which is expensive, and think, gosh, I use you for word processing, email, and to watch Netflix. That's it. I'm really interested, and I'm sure that you guys have thought about this. And Andy, this would be interesting, I think, for you, especially as an app developer, the relationship between our smartphones and our spiritual lives.
Sure.
Which is, I think that all of us, well, I should speak for myself. I've experienced, there are dangers there, and there are also real gifts. And like, I have a centering prayer app that I use every morning, and I'm glad I don't have to use a hourglass to time my sit, and instead have this nice chime. But then there's a shadow side for sure to the cell phone. But anyway, so I'm just curious about you. Like, how did you, tell us about your app, and then also
Sure.
Maybe that side of it, the spirituality of the cell phone.
Yeah. So for the listeners, I have written a iOS app called Daily Office that is designed exactly to do that, to facilitate people praying the Episcopal Daily Office.
And for our listeners who aren't Episcopalians or aren't in a liturgical tradition, can you tell us quickly what the Daily Office is?
Indeed. The Daily Office is a cycle of daily prayer services. So it's morning prayer, noonday prayer, evening prayer, and Compline, which is the night prayer. And what's great about the Daily Office is it offers sort of a rhythm of prayer. There's readings, there's psalms, there's canticles, songs from Scripture. But what's challenging about the Episcopal Daily Office is there's a bunch of variables depending on what time of year it is, what liturgical season it is. There's a lot of choices you can make about which canticles to use, which readings to use. You have to find, if you're praying it with the books, you've got the Book of Common Prayer here, and you got your Bible here, and you need to find where the readings are in Bible to keep on track for the cycle of readings, the Daily Office lectionary.
A choose your own adventure.
It's a choose your own prayer adventure. And the point of the app was to take all those variables. You can make settings, make your choices ahead of time. The app would just take that all, and it would just seamlessly put it together for you. So all you have to do is open up morning prayer, and it's got all the different variables, the opening sentences that change by season, and whether there's alleluias or not, they're written in or excluded. The Bible passages are just seamlessly put into the whole liturgy, all automatically. So you can just have it right there on your iPhone or your iPad.
Have you noticed any kind of change in your prayer between using the books and now using the app? Is there any substantive difference?
When I pray the daily office with prayer book, where I actually feel, I think, more present with the experience when I'm using a book. But I did say that I do still pray the daily office almost exclusively with the app. And I think that's in large part because of the way that it just seamlessly puts everything together. It's just easier. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit less rich in a way, but it's much easier. And so I do it more.
So first of all, my 19th century husband, as we were saying before, he is very much a fan of the daily office, morning and evening prayer every day, pretty much without fail. He always says, you need to read it from the book, sweetie. And I'll say, but I was on the subway train and I really thought I have time for morning prayer. And, this is when I was in San Francisco and there was just enough time to recite the office. And he said, but if you're doing that, you're not making any public witness. You just look like everyone else who's looking down at their phone. And even though you bow and cross yourself, people are going to say, what is he doing? Playing some video game where you have to do these actions. And so it's funny because he saw using the book, I guess, in public as a witness. Now, I had to actually use my phone once visiting someone at the hospital because I didn't have the book and I wanted to find a prayer. And it was the ECP, I think it's called, whatever that app is. And I had a heck of a time finding what I wanted. So I wound up making up prayers. But it was a little embarrassing, and I apologize profusely for whipping out the phone to, start praying with someone. And I wonder if, especially with this person who's of an older generation, that wasn't really a turnoff. Whereas, who knows, maybe with someone young, they'd be like, oh my God, the priest uses his smartphone for prayers. That's someone I would go to church with if I don't die in this hospital bed.
Well, I was thinking, just based on what you just said, Ricardo, that the church is often accused, and rightly so in many cases, of being just a few steps behind the culture. And I feel like whenever something comes out publicly, like whether it's an op-ed that kind of circulates on Facebook or in some other way, criticizing technology in this way, or at least raising questions about it, there's often this real backlash from the snarkers that, it's just a bunch of Luddites, like you can't, you keep up with the times, man, like don't be so behind. And I think that the pressure is real for me to be the priest who uses their smartphone to say a prayer or something, or at least to think that that's always the right decision. But I think that the truth is that many of us struggle with the way that our smartphones have interfered with our spiritual lives, not even necessarily our religious lives or our piety, which is what we've been talking about up until this point, but just our very sense of sort of being grounded spiritually. And I can't help but think that if we're feeling that way, our parishioners must be too.
So Andy's app, the Daily Office app for iOS, is he used the word it's an app of convenience, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an app of convenience, and I think that there's a challenge to spirituality. It's a challenge of convenience. I mean, where I see the struggles with getting parents or young people to come to church, it's that it's not convenient to come to church. It's not convenient for your Sunday mornings. It's not convenient for your family routine, and so it's a real sort of challenge to wake up, pile everybody into the car, get there Sunday morning, and make that a regular process for you. And I think that what sort of cell phone culture reinforces is, well, why do that when you've got this world at your fingertips, right? So I wonder if we're the victims of having an inconvenient institution.
I'm not being a very good salesman for my app, but as I was thinking further, though, I came to a very similar place, Greg, as to what you were saying, is connecting with what all of you've been saying, is that I think that there's a reflex tendency that I find in myself, and I know the church is guilty of, which is to be critical of the technology. There's an article that's been going around from The Atlantic, which talks about some of the detrimental possible effects of technology. And there's real benefits that come from it. I am able to pray in places that I wouldn't otherwise. I found myself waiting in line. I was like, oh, there's literally nothing else I can do now. May as well say a noonday prayer, because here I can. It's right here on the app. This is great. And so I've been able to turn moments of what would otherwise be boredom into at least the intention of spiritual presence.
I started reading the Bible on my iPhone, the King James Version with it's called the Bible app, I guess. I stopped, of course, because I got to Numbers or Leviticus and just was bored stiff. But it's great. You just keep scrolling. And I read it out loud, and it was fun. And it was also recorded, so you can hear someone reading it, as you looked at it. That was fun. And so there are fun things in here. And there's one other thing. I have it's called Insight Timer. And Liz, I think you mentioned something like this. It's like a little gong. If you want to time yourself for 15 minutes, you just close your eyes and wait for the bell to ring again. And then when you're done, it shows all these people on the app who are meditating at the same time around the world.
Oh, that's cool.
And you can go through and click on them and say, thanks for meditating with me. And it's sort of, frankly, for me, becomes a bit of almost a dating app. Like I look for the cute guys who are meditating, and I look at their pictures, and I'm like, thanks for meditating with me, Johannes in Germany.
You're swiping right on your meditation app.
Don't tell your husband that either.
Oh no, we meditate together, and I said, okay, I've got to thank my friends for meditating with me. And he rolls his eyes and says, okay, I'm sure they're all men. And I include I think those are little spiritual injections throughout the day that we can give ourselves. So I don't see a problem. I think for me, as they say, it's all good.
I got to say, Liz, just sort of going back to your question and what Ricardo just said here, like connection, right? I mean, that's the gift of the cell phone, of the smartphone, is the fact that we have the opportunity to use Facebook Messenger to get in touch with Andy Shamel to come on this episode of Popping Collars. Whereas, pre-smartphone, gosh, I mean, yeah, maybe we would be able to communicate online somehow, but having that ability to just pull it out of your pocket and say, let me shoot Andy a message and see if he can come on. That's amazing how well we're connected in this world. And that's what this device offers us.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And I think, like I said earlier, I too have spiritual apps that I use that have been helpful, especially because I travel so much for work that it's nice to be able to carry those in my pocket. But I may be an outlier here. But really, when you think of the whole of your life with your cell phone, which is now for most of us kind of our constant companion, throw a pie chart up there, Ricardo. How big of a slice of that pie is you using your religion apps?
Oh, as opposed to my Toy Blast app?
Yeah, and all the other stuff, and I don't need to call you out because it's my experience too. Like, I think there are wonderful things, but so I'll name some of the things for me, I guess, out myself that are spiritually challenging. One is that I don't allow myself to be bored very often anymore. Right. So I'll go to Facebook, which is not even a app that I like that much, and just scroll through it and kind of see what's happening. I get a little bit of an ego boost off of Instagram when I get lots of likes, and I don't feel like that's really good for me spiritually. Definitely compare myself to other people in ways that I didn't do before, because now it's way more people than just the ones in my personal life. And for me, the biggest spiritual challenge of all is the incorporation of my work life into my personal space. And it took me honestly just until 3 weeks ago to realize that I had to turn off my email app when I left the office and turn it back on again in the morning when I got to the office. Because I would be I'll check Facebook, and then, there's another email. Let me see who that is. And then, I could just never turn it off.
A couple of years ago, I was organizing a really stressful, complicated event at Stanford. I was working with a couple of people on it that I did not personally get along with very well. I was in the middle of a service, so I wasn't presiding, but I was at a church service, and I opened my phone reflexively, like you do, checked my email reflexively, and there was an email from one of these people that I didn't get along with. And it totally wrecked, like, I felt like I needed to respond, and I couldn't let this lie. It was like, it was the middle of a Holy Eucharist service. Like, what business do I have looking at my email in the middle of that? And B, I let myself get drawn in. And actually at that point, right after that service, I was chatting with my colleague who had been leading it. And he's like, yeah, I took my work email off my phone. And so I immediately deleted my work email off the phone. And my life immediately got so much better.
Words with Friends has a little place where you can send messages back and forth. And speaking of connection, Andy, that you were talking about in a different way, I've actually given pastoral counseling on those little messages on Words with Friends with people I probably wouldn't be in touch with really, daily, because I'm doing my next move on the Words with Friends. And so here's a person I haven't seen in 8 years. And suddenly she's telling me about her father who's dying and her relationship with him and her problems with the family. And we're just like doing the little kind of texts within Words with Friends. And it was kind of great. Again, I know there are plenty of like negative things about having smartphones so at hand. Many is the morning I have woken with the cell phone literally clasped in my little grubby hand because I fell asleep with it. To me, it's another avenue that has possibilities and has a lot of pitfalls as well. I can say things about the pitfalls, but maybe I'm fooling myself in thinking that for me, mostly it's a good thing in terms of my spirituality. I do things I wouldn't do otherwise because of my smartphone, spiritually and religiously even. And, being bored, I hear you, Liz. It's like, you're right. Like, even when I'm brushing my teeth, I'm doing a little swiping with the other hand with the phone. And why can't I just, think about my teeth or something? So that, I don't know. I don't know if there's spiritual value in being bored, but I think there's spiritual value in feeling a sense of absence for a few minutes every day, and seeing what might enter when you don't feel you have to always have every moment filled.
As the parent of 2 young children, what I've learned about smartphone technology and really just sort of tablet technology in general, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, is how intuitive it is. Like the fact that my 2-year-old can pick up a phone and generally figure out how to navigate to the YouTube Kids app, and then once in the app can navigate to whatever video it is that she wants to watch. Like for a 2-year-old to do that
intentionally, they want her to be able to do that.
Sure. And so developmentally start running into these issues of, how much screen time is appropriate screen time, and what does this do to a developing brain, and that's just part of parenting now is navigating this world of, these devices are there, so how do you sort of use them responsibly for the next generation? It just strikes me that for these girls, for my girls, they're going to grow up in a world where basically whatever piece of information they need is always available. Andy was talking about this idea of working with the theological mind and imagination. Gosh, like having this device, which is great, connects you to the world, but boy, it does sort of strip away that sense of imagination and figuring things out when information is at the touch of your fingertips and it's so easy to pull it out.
I think you have to wonder, you have to believe, and I kind of do, that there will be, in terms of our evolution, a different type of imagination that emerges because of that. I don't think that the human capacity, it's the human capacity for imagination that built this technology. So I guess what's scary to me is you don't know exactly what that looks like. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be, when you talk about generational gaps, that will be a big one, I think.
Is there a point after which we've gone too far? Things have become somehow too easy for too many people.
Well, I think and I guess the awkward part is that the answer to that question is different for different people. So there's there are people who would say we've already gone too far. Yeah, it just makes you wonder if like there's always going to be some form of technology that people are going to point to and say, well, now the game's change, you know? I mean, I could see people doing that for my generation with like pointing at Ataris and saying, oh, well, there you go. Like, the kids are never going to be the same now. Or VCRs or televisions or radios, or
I don't know about
always going to be something. Right?
I don't know about that printing press. It's going to make reading far too easy.
Give us one more plug for your app.
Sure. It's called Daily Office. You can find it on the iOS App Store. It is $9.99, which is a lot, but I should say that 100% of the profits go to 100% of the proceeds go to support Episcopal Relief and Development and the agency called Give Directly that aids in giving direct cash grants to people who need it in Africa. So all the money is going to good work.
That's great. Thanks, Andy. That's awesome. Now it's time for our final segment, Staff Picks, where a member of our staff gives you a pick of something that they're into or that they discovered recently that they'd like to share. And today's staff member is Greg. Greg, what have you got for us?
I'm stepping up to the plate here. I'm actually, you know what? I've got a staff pick that is going to be a preview, kind of our next episode. I know our next episode is one that Betsy's hosting. I know everyone's asking the question, where is Betsy? What happened to Betsy? Did you kick Betsy off the show? No, Betsy will be back. She'll be hosting the next episode. And she wants to talk about 90s culture when she comes back on. The 90s. The decade of the 90s.
I remember them.
But if you are unfamiliar with the decade of the 90s, may I recommend for your viewing pleasure a documentary series that's on HBO right now. It's called The Defiant Ones. It follows the careers of Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine as record producers. Now, Jimmy Iovine obviously goes well before the 90s, way back to the 70s, producing Born to Run with Bruce Springsteen and Damn the Torpedoes with Tom Petty. But
I'm having a moment over here thinking of Bruce Springsteen and Born to Run. Totally distracted me. Go ahead.
But Dre's story is very much a story of the 90s, very much a story of hip hop coming out of the experiences, especially of Compton, LA in the late 80s, and the context of Daryl Gates' sort of LAPD culture. How the California hip hop, West Coast hip hop, was in direct relationship to what was happening around them. And for the longest time, hip hop was associated with New York and East Coast, and it spoke to a very New York context. And so what Dre was looking for was to figure out a way for West Coast hip hop artists to be able to talk about what was happening to them. And so anyways, it's a fabulous documentary, especially the Dre portions, which I just found so captivating. He exposes all of his flaws in a way that, you know, the movie Straight Outta Compton kind of glossed over. Like, he faces them head on in this and talks about his history of violence against women and how that makes him a horrible person, and how he has to reflect on that, and how that brings him to where he is now. It's called The Defiant Ones. It's on HBO right now.
Well, thank you all for joining us for Poppin' Collars number 68. Special thanks to Andy Shamel for joining us as a guest today. Andy, safe travels on your upcoming adventure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to Greg and thanks to Ricardo. You can find all of our podcast episodes at poppingcollarspodcast.com. You can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher and all the other places where you get your podcasts. And finally, you can find us on episcopalcafe.com, where we are featured as a member of their podcasting network. So check them out. There's a lot of other great podcasts on Episcopal Cafe, and we love them, and we know you will too. So thanks again. We'll see you guys next time. Keep those collars what?
Pop, pop.
Popped. That's right.
Well done. Pop, pop.